Hello again and welcome to Manch Talk. I'm Tammy Simmons.
And I'm Carla Garrick.
And here we are. I think this is almost next weekend. Not this weekend. Next weekend's Memorial Day already. Which is weird because it feels like we're past Memorial Day.
No, it's this coming weekend, isn't it? Because I have
Oh, you are right. It is this coming.
No,
it is this coming weekend. I'm still on. My day's always
okay. Yeah, today is Tuesday, and this weekend is.
We
Memorial
have a long
Day
weekend, which is nice. But I mean, it's been really nice out. Like considering Memorial Day. Sometimes you have Memorial Day and it's still cold and crappy.
Right. No, it's quite lovely. I am glad. Of course, now it's the pollinating and
It's our car is so gross.
Oh, but like, what are these tree worms that are everywhere? There's this like almost tumbleweedy level of pollen, like the little thingies, and they're just my driveway looks like it's filled with like pollen. Tumbleweed, which will explain the snotting.
My friend...
The pollinating gives you the snotting. That's not even a word.
My friend Derek Dufresne, who's from Manchester, who lives down in D.C. or Virginia or whatever, he posted this video the other day about the cicadas.
Yeah, the 17-year.
So, like, basically these cicadas bury themselves down in the earth and then 17 years later come up. But he played a video. I really couldn't... I'm sure you could hear it in real life. He goes, it's disturbing, though, because there's noise coming from underneath landscape fabric that wasn't there.
Oh,
and he goes,
so they're trapped? Oh, no.
Right? It was just something I would never have thought about. I was like, oh, my God. He goes, he had a video, but I'm sure in real life, if he was videotaping it, it had to have been.
I mean, I'm like,
like crushed rock with landscape fabric underneath, and there's like...
Oh, that would totally creep me out,
right?
And two, it's
what's wrong?
Yeah, that's kind of sad because one has to think if there's this weird life cycle.
There's a reason for it.
Right? You know, there's a planetary plan there.
Right.
So I don't know.
So I guess so many fun things. The Windham election audit. So I was reading this morning because I just want to make sure I didn't miss something because I'm trying not to spend too much time. I mean, there's people who spend a lot of time on this. So they figured it. They did figure it out.
They think they did, right? So the fold on the
so fold in Windham, because there were so many absentee ballots, and they couldn't keep up with the requests. So they borrowed a folding machine, a mechanical folding machine from the Department of Motor Vehicles, right? Which I used to own a print shop, puts a very distinct fold in the ballot. So what they believe happened, because they remade folded things and they ran them through the machine and it did do what they were thinking. Basically, when you vote, if it says vote for no more than 4 and you fill in 5 dots, that's an overvote and the machine doesn't count any of those. If you only vote for 2, it doesn't care. But it does look, it scans. So in Windham's case, the fold line from this mechanical ran right through Christy St. Lawrence bubble.
The Democrats.
The one Democrat that was involved in the recount.
Yeah, so she filed for the recount.
What happened was the machine read that fold as a vote. So that did 2 things, because I was like, well, wait a minute, how did that work in both directions? In the Democrats' case, in the recount, she lost 100 votes because 100 of the votes that were counted for her didn't exist because they were folds. And the Republican candidates, all of the Republican candidates, which makes sense, gained 300. But that's because if they voted for all the Republicans... That would have been 4 votes. And then the dot that didn't exist for Christy St. Laurent created 300 overvotes. So all those Republican votes were not counted. The good thing that came out of this is the machines were not hacked, which everybody that has any tech says these machines are from 1981. They're like not hackable because it doesn't exist. Like, you can't hack. It's like saying...
Well, they're not online.
Right, but they also... It'd be like saying you're going to hack, your 1981 television, and you're like, yeah, that's not going to happen. Maybe my smart TV at home now, but not my one from 1981.
Sure.
the bad thing is that, I mean, I guess it's good that there's a reason why it happened specifically in Windham, specifically in this election. It isn't like all the elections across the state, because everybody folds the ballots, but they don't fold them necessarily mechanically. So it does address the possibility of future, like, is the machine too sensitive, or do we really have to be careful about where the print is on the paper?
Well, I also think maybe this is a good opportunity to be like, let's not really lean into this absentee ballotism.
Yeah.
Let's make it so that people should,
right.
Go vote. And, this should, 2020,
yep.
touch wood, fingers crossed, should be a human outlier.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
we shouldn't really have these issues coming up again. I find it fascinating that it seems like the conspiracy theories from early last year are now being affirmed.
Well, the whole Wuhan virus thing.
Wuhan virus that was made in a lab that we were talking about, a year ago. It seems quite, the facts are coming out, and it really does appear like this was a man-made a man-made virus, and that it escaped the lab.
And they had
like,
their staff members from that lab sought medical attention back in like November of 2019, which was 2 months before this really became apparent that there was a problem. So, of course, the Chinese government is saying, oh, no, U.S. is just trying to point the finger. And I'm thinking, no, everybody, it's just kind of like...
See, it doesn't make sense for the U.S. government to point the finger. I mean, there's the whole China virus narrative, which I don't like. But the more interesting finger...
We should be calling it the Fauci virus. How about
that? That Fauci, who owns a bunch of patents, who is involved and getting rich from pushing the vaccines, who has so many conflicts of interest within this entire scenario, was involved with this gain of function.
Yep.
And he frankly lied, in front of Congress and in front of Rand Paul.
Yep.
And they can try and push the truth and subvert it and censor it, and I know that I followed that rabbit hole.
Yep.
Last year, and I was like, well, I'm persuaded, no one's going to believe me, and I'm censored off the platforms if you want to talk about anything substantive. But, it feels good to be like, okay, it looks like, once again, the people who do their own research and don't rely on other people to tell them what to think, we're right.
On the virus, because, how do we not talk about this all the time, right? The CDC has lifted, is no longer recommending that people have to wear masks. And Dr. Chan in New Hampshire is all like, oh, why did they say that without giving us a heads up? And I'm like, well, because that's what they said. And why do we need a heads up? And there's still people, and you know what? If you're uncomfortable and you want to wear a mask, I don't really care. Right? I don't care. I don't care if you want to wear rubber boots in the middle of the summer because you're afraid your feet get wet. None of this is my business. But there's still so many people who can't get past that. Maybe we don't have to.
Well, I think it's partly that indoctrination,
it is.
Right? So the government spent a year breaking people's brains, spreading, fear-mongering at a heightened level that was entirely unnecessary given the risks we were facing. And now they're kind of like, ooh, how do we unbreak the brains we broke? And I think this whole...
People just get caught up in you can tell just with the words they use that you're like, okay, but that's not anything. So now I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to start going back to posting scientific things because people have to stop with the emotion, and it's hard. I don't know how they do it. So now I
Good luck with that.
Last year I spent a lot of time posting how few people were actually testing positive. Now I've been looking at if you Google RT COVID NH, you can find a website. It gives the daily the R factor, which is basically if it's 1 or above, that you're spreading this virus is increasing.
Right.
The higher the number, the faster it's spreading. If the number drops below 1, the spread of virus is decreasing below, like it's not spreading. and we're down to I think it was 0.69 this morning. So we're in and every day it has been dropping. So the people who are saying, but you still need to wear your mask because we're still spreading the virus, I don't know how low that number will have to get again before you go, but it's not spreading.
Well, both that and someone had asked on Facebook, they said, is this because of the vaccination rate and because
some of it.
And herd immunity because of vaccinations and all of that. And I said, who knows, right? Because this isn't really a vaccine.
No. So it is
and a lot of people who get it actually do then contract COVID. So one might say it is spreading COVID, but that's a conversation for another day. But, they're looking at this and they're not thinking, what does the chart look like from last year?
Right.
So I'm pretty sure you can take a chart and overlay it last year this time to this year this time, and it'll look almost identical, at least in terms of the curve, because we know it's seasonal.
Yes.
We know it declines as it gets warmer, which is, why we saw last year. I mean, there was really no reason to lock down and to super mask and to do all of that stuff over the summer, because you can look worldwide. And in fact, I encourage people, I don't have the URL here, but I'll put it when we share this. I saw a really cool teaching tool where they took, I think it was like 20 questions, and it's graphs, and you can go in and you can guess. So you can look at a graph, say, of Florida, Texas, New Hampshire, Iowa, and South Dakota, or all 50 states, right? And then you can look at what happened on the graph, and then you can go pick where you think they instituted the mask mandate.
Yeah, and they
so
don't
if you believe the mask mandate reduced the
transmission, the number would go down.
The number would go down. But what you'll learn by doing it yourself and actually looking at the data is that none of those things, nothing we did changed how the graphs look across the world. So there are countries where there were hardcore lockdowns, there were states where there were hardcore lockdowns, there were all this stuff. But when you look at the actual data, you learn that we could have just acted like normal, been like there is a virus, going around this winter.
Be extra careful.
Maybe don't go to your friend's house when you're like
half sick.
Sick, which seems like a common courtesy most of the time.
Yep.
And, we could have gone on with life, which means we would not have the inflation we're about to see.
Oh, the prices of everything are
up 50%.
Yeah, and everything.
Chicken wing shortage. Apparently
the wings.
So that must mean a chicken shortage.
Well, what did Dan and I were out and about running errands, doing stuff the other day, and Dan goes, why don't we just grab a hot dog? And I was like, he goes, and I'm like, that'd be a great lunch. Let's just grab a hot dog. Okay, why are there no, the stores, the convenience stores that have those little griller? Okay, we went into 2 different ones. They've taken out the grillers. So
I would say that, thank you, society is saving Tammy from a gas station hot dog.
But I just thought it was strange. It was like, so does the COVID stick to the hot dog that we had to get rid of the grills? Or is this, all of this just an excuse?
It's
weird
stuff. It's
very weird.
And
it's just still weird. I some of the things we went to a restaurant that happens to have a buffet, and I'm not going to talk about which one it is because I don't want to make bad of it because it's a good restaurant. And they're like, oh, you have to wear a mask when you're up. And he was like, he was also apologetic. But I think we might change that in a week because I think you start to realize, because all of my customers think I'm insane still. Because COVID doesn't spread because I'm putting a scoop of something on my plate. That doesn't
No, I think the realization that we're going to learn out of this is we discovered how much the mainstream media colludes with the government, because that's really what we saw. I think the government overreacted, maybe because they were like, maybe we can get one news place to cover this, and then everyone just went, oh, we're going to lean into this news story, and then it just sort of snowballed into what we see now. But I'm very happy that the mask mandate is gone. People who want to wear one should wear one. People who don't want to wear one don't wear one. Life goes on, and and thank goodness we are on the path towards normal.
Speaking of government overreaction, because
Our favorite topic.
So if you didn't see it in the paper the other day, and this is just silly stuff. It really isn't this isn't a critical thing, but it does show, in my opinion, how government overreacts to things, that government gets involved in things they don't need to. There's a 54-year-old woman out in Exeter who apparently when she signs her name, puts a little heart after her name. That's how she always signed. That is her signature. My signature, you would never know what my name is. It's like a T and a thing, right? Because I've got all these bumps and M's, and it's just awful. So, she registered her vehicle or driver's license or whatever it was, and you have to sign
in the block. Yeah.
In the block, and they sent her a letter, and she had to come back because they said her signature was invalid. And I was like, how is a signature invalid? And they said you can't use, it says in the law that you can't add words. You can't be like T. Simmons, live free or die. Okay, that I kind of get. But this is no different than I have an I in my name that I kind of hit a dot. What if I do a check mark? Is that the DMV actually won't let her have that part of her signature? And I thought, one, why the heck does the DMV care what your signature looks like? And two, now the DMV has a signature that actually isn't this woman's signature, because this woman's signature ends with a little heart. We can all debate whether a 54-year-old woman needs to put a heart after her name or not. That's irrelevant.
Yes, she does. If she wants to, she can.
If she wants to put I put smiley faces. It's not part of my signature. I do it frequently when I sign my first name, like in a note.
Yeah, I do a heart with Carla if I do my name.
But I mean, if I'm literally doing that as part of my normal signature, if she buys a house, I can bet you she signs her name and puts a little heart, because that's what she does. And the DMV says she can't, because, government overreacts to all sorts of ridiculously stupid
I
things.
even refuse to even talk about this anymore, because I was reading someone's, sort of coaching page today, and they were talking about the law of attraction and how, it's really important that what you put out is what you get back, right? And I'm trying to really live by that, right? So when I see all those groups online and they're talking about where you can wear a mask and what's happening and all of that, I was just like, I'm not really going to pay attention to that, because all I'm doing is I'm living my life. And so I'm not wearing a mask, and I'm just going where I'm going, and, within that parameter. Now, I understand it's for support, I think, for some people.
Well, I think originally it was more for support when there was only a handful of restaurants that you could go to that weren't going to now people say, well, I went into, I don't even know where, I went into Lowe's last week and didn't wear a mask, and I'm like, I've been going into Lowe's with no mask for months now.
Right. I will say this, I had to go to the post office last week, which is my favorite, because I have to mail books, right, that people have been ordering, thank you. And so I, in the past, could put them in a bubble wrap envelope, slap some stamps on it, and throw it in the mailbox. And in fact, I used to do that. That would be part of my Tuesday run. There's a mailbox right outside the studio. Yeah. I would do that, right? And then they got returned. And I asked my mailman,
why?
Why? And he was like, oh, this is a new thing. It's slightly too thick, but also because there's stamps on. And I was like, what?
Because isn't the stamp how it works?
So you can imagine there's nothing that makes Carla happier than having to go to the post office for something that I shouldn't have to go to. But I was also submitting my book for the New Hampshire Writers Project Literary Award. So if you're a writer and you wrote a book in the past 2 years, you can go to NHWP, New Hampshire Writers Project, and look up. They have instructions for the Lit Awards. Just don't be better than me. Anyway, so I had to mail a box as well, right? Yep. So I walk in, and I notice that there are signs saying this is a federal facility and you must still wear a face mask. So I think they were, getting a little bit of friction or pushback. So fine. So I go, and I'm just like, la, 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 I have my shades on. I'm just like smiling at everyone. I'm just with my butt. So I get to the counter. Now I'm trying to understand why I can't mail these. So eventually what she calls a manager over, and I'm not being difficult. I'm just trying to understand. Hey, I don't really like coming here. I'd like to just be able to mail it, maybe give it to my mailman. What's the deal? And the guy's like, no, it's because people might mail, because it's anonymous when it's stamps, and people might mail dangerous things or bombs. And I'm like, well, clearly this is a book. First of all. Second of all, why are we treating ordinary
Everybody
people
as if they're
like
doing...
criminals? Because
Right?
that is a terrible world to function in. And he just kind of looked at me, like I don't think he'd ever thought about it that way. So he wanders off. Now I'm writing some label, and I'm writing, and the lady, and there's plexiglass and the whole thing. And then I hear her go, oh my.
She doesn't have a mask on.
I didn't realize you weren't wearing a mask.
Oh,
She's
no.
like whispering, and I'm just like, doo-doo-doo, I'm just not gonna hear you.
Oh, dear.
And oh dear, right?
Oh, dear.
So we sorted it out. I mailed everything. But I was just like, they're behind plexiglass. We were all social distancing. So it's all theater, right? So
It's
it's
so
just all
theater.
silly at this stage. So it turns out now I have to go online. You have to attach a credit card to your address in order to.
It's just
so it's just
stop
no
with the
more-
post office. That's what it's
Yeah.
coming down to. Everything that the post office does is so difficult that people are just finding other ways to not have to deal with the post office.
So can we talk about this high school location situation?
Let's talk about...
Okay, you go. First.
Let's do this,
Okay.
and next week we'll talk about high school location again, because that's all just craziness. But anyways, budget surplus forecast, City Finance Director Sharon Wickens presented, which currently projects an operating surplus of $2,928,500. That's because of the federal monies that they got, but rest assured, your taxes will still go up. But what I did find peculiar, and I tried to put it in a correlation that people can understand. According to Wickens, the city had 37 retirements through May 17th, which is on par with the 37 retirements from the previous fiscal year. So
Okay.
37 people every year. Severance.
That's that's probably
It's a thing.
in a spreadsheet somewhere.
Severance paid through May 17th in this fiscal year was $1,727,744, which was up about $300,000 over last year.
Wow.
So this is money that is paid to people when they leave employment. That comes out to about, if you average out, they're not all equal, but let's just say that it comes out to $47,000 a person.
So that's severance that you get before you get your pension?
It has nothing to, yes, you can,
So
this
you're
is just like bonus.
This is like I believe that in the private sector, we call that a golden parachute.
Right. So the police department had 12 retirements, $682,000 in severance. Fire department had 12 retirements. So that means there was another 13 people beyond those two departments. But just to put it into perspective, so if we spent, you, me, Carla, because it's our money, we spent $47,000 on average per person that retired. And using the premise that I'm sure it's changed, but that it costs $1 million per mile to redo the roads, which sounds crazy, but let's just go with that. That means $50,000 you could do what? With 10 of those. I mean, 1.7 million, you could do 2 miles of road this year.
Right.
Next year, when 37 more people retire, you could do 2 more miles of road. And just to try to what's a mile of road, right?
But I'm really confused here. Why do people get severance?
I don't know, because it's in the union package, and
But that's on top of a pension, right?
Yes, your pension is 50%. If you're at the age requirement, and everything, your pension is 50% of. I believe it's 50% of what your top 3 years' earnings were. So if you made $100,000 a year as a firefighter,
They put it in so that they bump up the.
I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
Because I know that's also something that.
But it's just crazy. It's just like when people talk about priorities and why, Lou D'Alessandro had an op-ed in the paper about how we need property tax relief. Well, property taxes are driven at the local level. So Lou D'Alessandro is supporting Joyce Craig, who is not doing anything to reduce spending at the city level. But meanwhile, $1.7 million just this year alone was spent on severance packages, in addition to the money that we have to pay into the pensions. There is a broken number in the spreadsheet. You can't keep increasing the cost of people who no longer work for the government faster than we can raise taxes. It just doesn't add up, and nobody.
Oh, but be careful of framing it that way, because the enemies of liberty will be like, so we should put up taxes. Because
No, we
this
should
whole
just stop
game,
spending the damn money.
right, but this whole game where they're starting to say, oh, we need local property tax relief. We do, but the problem is it's because we don't manage our schools right. And we are spending
crazy amounts of money.
I mean, just
extra millions every year with declining population.
And again, I'm just like, why are people so scared of school choice? Why don't we just let people experiment for 10 years and then we come back?
We come back and we're like, well, that was
what worked, what didn't work? Really, were all these kids left by the wayside?
It's not about kids or education. It is about union jobs and unions being in control and unions dictating everything and unions taking your money and my money and your money and feeding their system.
So I did see, I had to drive up to the North Country yesterday, and when I was getting on the highway at Amoskeag Bridge at exit 6, I noticed there were all these anti-right to work
Yeah, because the
signs
union
that are now
headquarters is
out.
right there.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, wow, is someone really like upset about trying to make it not compulsory to join something? Right? So the people who support right to work, meaning no one is forced into a union, any of those relationships. No one's saying you can't unionize.
Right, and nobody's saying you can't join a union.
Right, what's being said is you can't make the people who don't want to be in the union be in the union, right? So you are creating a better competitive thing because people have the option of being in it or not being in it. When you have a monopoly, which is forced unionization, you, of course, don't really see good services because they're not beholden to anyone. So
I think that vote comes up next week, by the way.
Yeah, so it's going to be a busy, there's a lot of things attached to the budget. People are fighting about the budget. It should be an interesting couple of weeks.
We'll see.
So I think we've got that warning. Yep.
So say we talked about things. We don't have to have a lot of prep.
No.
Next week we should really talk about this more of this crazy school expansion. Let's build a
because again, remember the thing was we need to close 4 schools. Period.
Right, we need to close our schools, so we should build a gigundous school,
which makes
someplace.
Absolutely no sense.
Government. Anyways,
in a nutshell,
enjoy your long weekend this weekend. Check out Carla's book. You can find it at carlagarrick.com, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Get out there and clean your yard. This is the last week for weekly yard waste pickup. Starting next week, the week after Memorial Day, you go to an every other week, so you'll have to check out which week it is and kind of remember.
And honestly, if you live in the city and your street is dirty, can you just pick up the trash in front of your house so that we don't all have to live in a pigsty? Because I do it and you can do it too.
I feel like it. Anyways, that's all we got.
Take care.
Have a great week. Bye.
Bye.